Okay, let's jump right into this deep dive. Today, we are plunging headfirst into the fascinating world of habits, how they actually form, why they get stuck, and what the science really says it takes to change them.
And we're doing that by looking at psychologist Jeremy Dean's book, Making Habits, Breaking Habits, Why We Do Things, Why We Don't, and How to Make Any Change Stick, extracting the core insights.
Exactly. So our mission here is pretty straightforward. Unpack these sources, grab the most important nuggets of knowledge, and help you understand the science behind your daily routine so you can hopefully apply it to your own life.
And right off the bat, the book tackles something you've probably heard everywhere.
Oh yeah, the hook. What is it?
That idea that it only takes 21 days to
Yeah.
form a new habit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dean looks into this, and, well, the reality, as it often is, it's far more complex and, honestly, much more interesting.
Okay, let's unpack this then. So the book dived straight into debunking that super popular 21-day rule. You hear it all the time. And Dean, being a psychologist, he's expecting actual research citations, for such a widely quoted idea.
And he found absolutely none, not tied to this specific number anyway, not for every habit. He points out it's cited constantly: exercise, smoking, writing, but there's just no solid, specific research backing up 21 days as the magic number.
Which is kind of wild, right? That idea is so ingrained. So, okay, if it's not about a fixed number of days, how does Dean's work describe what a habit fundamentally is? What are its core features?
Well, one of the main things that really stands out is this sense of vague awareness while you're doing them. Think about driving your usual route to work. Do you actively notice every single turn, every light?
No, probably not. You kind of zone out, right?
Exactly. You zone out. This work mentions a study where people reported only actively thinking about their habitual behavior. Maybe 40% of the time they were actually doing it.
Only 40%. Wow.
And that's a huge part of why we have habits in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
They free up our conscious mental energy. They sort of protect us from that decision fatigue feeling.
Yeah.
By automating these repetitive tasks, your unconscious mind basically handles the tedious stuff, leaving your, processing power free for more important things.
So it's the unconscious taking the wheel for efficiency. Makes sense.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And Dean defines a habit not just by your current intention, what you want to do, but as this powerful combination of your intentions plus your history, your past behavior.
Okay, that brings us to a really crucial question this deep dive explores. Can your conscious intention, your willpower, actually overcome a strong established habit? Because intuitively we think, yeah, I just need to decide to change.
This is where the research is quite revealing, actually. The book discusses these studies where participants were asked to predict their own behavior over the next week. How often they'd eat fast food or watch TV news, take the bus, things like that.
Right. And what was the key finding there?
Well, their past behavior, their habit, was a much, much better predictor of what they would actually do than what they said they intended to do, especially when the habit was strong.
A much better predictor.
Yes, and here's where it gets really interesting, almost hinting at a, let's call it a dark side of habits. The participants with the strongest, most ingrained habits were actually the least successful at predicting their own behavior over that week.
Wait, the least successful?
Yeah, but they were also the most confident in their wrong predictions.
Wow. So the more automatic something is, the less accurate we are at predicting if we'll do it, but the more we feel like we know exactly what we'll do. That's counterintuitive.
Exactly. It's like that familiarity makes us feel like we're in control, even when the data shows our behavior is being driven by something less conscious than our immediate plans. And this really highlights why, psychologists historically have tried to change habits like diet and exercise by just focusing on changing intentions, getting people motivated.
Right, just change the goal.
But Dean's work points out that while they often succeed in getting people to intend to change, the actual behavior shift is often quite low when those existing habits are really powerful.
It's like the best intentions just crumble when the situation triggers the old automatic behavior. So what makes a habit strong versus weak in the first place? Is it just doing it more often?
Well, frequency is definitely key. The book mentions a psychological review that looked at this, and it classified habits into sort of two main types. Things done at least weekly, like exercising maybe, having coffee, putting on a seatbelt.
Okay, the regular stuff?
Versus things done only a few times a year, like donating blood or getting a flu shot.
So the difference between a strong and weak habit lies somewhere on that spectrum, weekly versus, say, annually.
Exactly. Frequency matters a lot. But just as vital is the context. Dean really emphasizes this. Habitual behaviors performed in really stable, consistent situations, like always grabbing the same coffee from the same place on your commute, they're even less susceptible to our conscious intentions trying to butt in at that moment.
Huh. That's a surprising implication, isn't it? It suggests behaviors we do weekly may be in the same context, like going to a particular restaurant every Friday or watching a specific show each week. They might feel like deliberate choices,
Yeah, you feel like you're choosing it each time.
but the research suggests they function more like those daily automatic things, with less conscious control than we probably give ourselves credit for.
We're running on autopilot a lot more than we tend to think.
And speaking of autopilot, the book delves into the unconscious mind, right? It contrasts the sort of modern psychological view, which sees the unconscious as largely inaccessible, hard to just look at,
Right, not something you can easily introspect about.
with older ideas like Freud's, where you could supposedly just dig down and find all the answers if you tried hard enough.
Yeah, modern psychology views it more as this incredibly complex background processing system. The book shares this intriguing study. It was done in a mall selling identical nightgowns and stockings.
Oh, I think I know this one. The one where people overwhelmingly preferred the item on the far right, even though they were all the same.
Yes. 4-1. Seemingly just by accident, or at least they couldn't explain why, researchers only noticed this pattern later. It's a small example, but it's a telling glimpse into how unconscious influences, maybe something as subtle as reading direction influencing visual preference, can subtly sway our seemingly conscious choices.
So our preferences and decisions aren't always the result of some deep rational thought process.
Probably not. And this seems to be where habits live constantly sort of bubbling up from this unconscious level, automatically initiated by environmental cues. You see a doorknob, you get the urge to reach. See a plate of food, maybe the habit of eating gets cued.
And thankfully, we have what the book calls inhibitory processes that stop us from acting on all those automatically triggered habits, right?
Exactly. We don't just start eating every single time we see food if we're not hungry, for instance. Something stops that automatic response.
The book also brings in B.F. Skinner's view, the classical behaviorist perspective on habit formation. It kind of likens humans to his famous lab animals, just, more complex.
Right, the core idea that habits form through simple environmental rewards. Skinner put hungry pigeons in a box, gave them food every 15 seconds, totally regardless of what they were doing.
Okay.
And the pigeons started repeating whatever random action they happened to be doing right before the food appeared, like stretching their neck or walking in circles. They became superstitious, acting as if these random actions caused the reward.
Huh. So they developed little habits based on a coincidence.
Exactly. And Skinner's view, which Dean touches upon, is that human habits work in a kind of similar way. We learn that certain behaviors in specific situations lead to rewards. Getting paid for work, getting a smile back when you smile, feeling pleasure from alcohol in a social setting. The repetition of the behavior in response to the situation, reinforced by that reward, that's what builds the habit.
Okay, that classic perspective explains a lot, but it doesn't fully account for those situations where habits start working against us, does it?
No, exactly. Which happens, well, probably more often than we'd like to admit. The book talks about habits going off the rails. Like this simple example of reaching for a light switch during a power cut.
Right, I've done that. The cue dark room triggers the habit.
But the intended goal, getting light, obviously isn't achieved. It's just the automatic action firing off.
Or, much more seriously, when habits directly contradict our stated goals. Wanting to lose weight but automatically reaching for the cake at the office party, wanting a promotion but habitually procrastinating on the big project.
Yeah, there's a real disconnect sometimes between what we consciously desire and what our automatic self just does.
Dean uses the example of alcohol, too. Socializing cues the habit of drinking, but then the alcohol itself impairs your reasoning,
Lowers inhibition.
making you more reliant on automatic behaviors and habits, which then reinforces more drinking. It's this dangerous loop that can override your initial goal to just have one or two.
And this raises a really important point about habits that aren't just physical actions. The book introduces the concept of habits of thought.
Right. These are less visible than behaviors, maybe harder to spot, but incredibly powerful. The discussion touches on OCD, for example. Intrusive thoughts trigger anxiety.
Which is then temporarily relieved by compulsive behaviors like checking or cleaning.
And that temporary relief from the anxiety acts as a powerful reward, doesn't it? It reinforces the compulsive behavior, strengthens that habit loop, even though it doesn't actually solve the underlying anxiety long term.
Exactly. And Dean notes how these tendencies often tap into pretty universal human desires, for cleanliness, order, safety.
He mentions that common phrase, oh, I get totally OCD about that. It's kind of revealing how narrow the gap can sometimes feel between those normal desires and when the behavior becomes a distressing, uncontrollable habit. Habits can be both a savior, providing structure, and a curse when they take over.
The book also connects depression to a habitual, pessimistic thinking style. Things like personalization, always thinking, it's my fault, or catastrophizing, this is the worst thing ever, seeing negative events as uncontrollable and permanent. Research shows this way of thinking is strongly linked to vulnerability to depression.
And rumination is part of that too, isn't it?
Hmm.
Just dwelling on negative thoughts over and over. Dean points out that people often feel like this constant mulling over is helping them solve problems.
Yeah, like they're working through it.
But studies show it actually interferes with effective problem solving. It's most strongly associated with things like anxiety and depression, not solutions.
It's that key difference between abstract worry that just sort of spins around and amplifies the problem versus concrete worry that actually leads to planning or action. Habitual abstract rumination just keeps you stuck in the mud.
The book also highlights what it calls the price of automatization, basically. The errors and slip-ups that happen when habits run automatically, sometimes cued inappropriately, like pouring water into an already full teapot.
Right, or that famous anecdote about Donald Norman's student who absent-mindedly put a $5 bill in his mouth instead of the crouton that had fallen onto his lunch tray. Just habit gone wrong.
These might seem like silly blunders, but they illustrate a deeper point Dean makes. This powerful habit of seeing what we expect to see, rather than seeing what's actually there.
Yes. Like the co-pilot on that Delta Flight 1141, he tragically called out, "Flaps 15, 15, green light," from memory during the pre-flight check, overriding the fact that the flaps weren't actually set correctly.
Oh, wow.
His ingrained expectation and the habit of the checklist sequence literally overrode reality with devastating consequences.
It's chilling.
Or think about musicians automatically correcting intentional errors written into a score, or how our eyes just glide over spelling errors in the middle of words when we're reading quickly. Our brains on autopilot are seeing what they expect, not necessarily what is.
Okay, so it's crystal clear. Our habits aren't just these internal willpower things. They're deeply, deeply tied to our environment.
Absolutely. The book discusses how fields like injury prevention have really shifted their focus over time. Instead of just blaming individuals, be more careful, they look at the interaction between people and their surroundings. We are embedded in physical and social environments, and we automatically respond to cues within them.
Like our travel choices. They become habitual pretty quickly.
Right.
And that learned route or mode of transport just seems to take over. Trying to rationally reevaluate it in the moment is incredibly difficult.
Yeah, it requires conscious thought before you start acting on the habit. Dean mentions environmental interventions like maybe offering free bus passes as attempts to weaken driving habits by changing the cue structure, making an alternative easier and more obvious.
Eating habits are another classic example discussed. Often highly routine, often unconscious, what people call mindless eating.
The popcorn study is just a perfect illustration of that. People were given these huge containers of stale popcorn, objectively bad popcorn, but they ate 53% more than people given medium containers.
Even though it tasted bad.
Even though it tasted bad. And afterwards, hardly anyone thought they'd eaten more because of the container size. The environmental cue, the big bucket, and the habit of eating while watching a movie just completely overrode their hunger signals or their taste assessment.
Wow. And shopping habits, brands loyalty, show this too.
Definitely. We often assume we choose brands based on satisfaction or finding the best deal, but Dean points out that satisfaction often doesn't actually predict whether someone will switch. Habits can easily override rational evaluation, or even things like discounts or incentives.
We just grab the same milk from the same spot in the supermarket because
that's
what we always do. It's the familiar path, the default, the habit.
Exactly. But the environment can also be a powerful force for positive change. It's not all bad news. The book cites smoking bans as strong evidence.
Right. After the ban in public places in the UK, for instance.
There was a significant drop in smoking prevalence overall, and interestingly, higher quit rates, especially among people who used to smoke mainly in pubs. The change in this situation, the context, made the old habit harder and less appealing.
So the situation, the context, the environment, it really does have more power to influence our habits than maybe we like to think, doesn't it?
It really does. We're constantly reacting to cues around us, often without any conscious effort at all.
Okay, so given all this, the sheer power of past behavior and context, the unconscious influences, the ways habits can go wrong and are tied to our environment, how on earth do we actually make new habits stick or break old ones? The book thankfully shifts gears here to strategies that science suggests actually work.
Yeah, it moves into the making habits part. And it starts by looking at some seemingly simple routines of highly productive people, like Jerry Seinfeld's don't break the chain calendar method for writing jokes every single day.
Right, just put an X on the calendar each day you do it.
Yeah. Or P.G. Wodehouse, the author, had this incredibly rigid daily writing structure. These stories, while maybe a bit extreme, they hide a basic truth about just steady, consistent, regular effort. Showing up.
But before diving into specific techniques like that, Dean emphasizes something really crucial right up front: motivation and goal setting.
Yeah.
You absolutely need an ultimate goal that is genuinely meaningful to you, something truly worth achieving.
Yeah, spending even just a few minutes really thinking about why you want this habit change pays huge dividends later on. If your fundamental reasons, your goals, aren't strong, it's incredibly difficult to muster and maintain the effort needed when things inevitably get hard.
Which they always do at some
Yes.
point.
Then it introduces a technique called mental contrasting. This involves visualizing the positive outcome you want, achieving your new habit, how great it will feel, but then crucially, honestly contrasting that with the current negative reality you want to change.
So it's not just positive thinking, it's positive outcome versus current reality.
Exactly. It forces a kind of reality check. It helps you decide if the goal is truly achievable for you right now. And research suggests it's most effective when you already have fairly high expectations of success. It helps you commit fully if it seems possible, or maybe adjust your plan or goal if the contrast makes it feel too daunting.
Okay, that makes sense. Following that is something called implementation intentions. These are essentially if-then plans.
Yes. And these are incredibly powerful. They work like shields for new fragile habits, protecting them from disruptions, whether that's internal states like feeling tired or stressed,
Yeah.
or external situations that might derail you.
Like the example in the book.
Yeah, Dean uses the example of table tennis players planning ahead. If I feel myself getting angry after losing a point, then I will take a deep breath and refocus. You pre-decide your response to a common trigger that usually sends you off track.
And you can extend this idea to coping planning, specifically targeting challenging situations, the temptations, the moments where the old habit is most likely to pop up.
Precisely. You anticipate the specific scenarios where you're most likely to falter. For someone trying to quit smoking, it might be first thing in the morning or when they feel stressed at work.
So you plan for those moments.
You plan an alternative action in advance. If I'm tempted to smoke when I first wake up, then I will immediately go make a cup of tea and listen to a specific podcast. You're essentially hijacking the old cue and linking it to a new, planned, alternative behavior.
Now, one of the most effective techniques Dean highlights, backed up by large studies on things like healthy eating and exercise, is actually pretty simple: self-monitoring. Just tracking your behavior.
Yeah, keeping a record. But the book really stresses it's not just noticing what you did or didn't do. You have to act upon the information you track.
So it's feedback loop.
Exactly. It's an iterative process. You track, you see what's working, what's realistic for you, and you adjust your plan accordingly. And crucially, don't beat yourself up over a slip-up. Skipping the odd day or missing one repetition isn't going to derail the whole process long-term. Be kind to yourself.
Because the core mechanic is that repetition, doing the thing in the same situation over and over, right?
Yeah.
That's what builds the habit towards that point where it becomes automatic, unconscious.
That's the goal. And while external rewards or penalties, carrots or sticks can sometimes provide a short-term boost, the book emphasizes that intrinsic motivation is ultimately key for long-term success.
Meaning doing the new behavior because you actually value it for its own sake, or you enjoy it, or it aligns with who you want to be.
Exactly. That internal drive makes habits stick much more successfully long-term than just relying solely on external motivators, which can fade.
Okay, what about breaking strong, really well-established habits? Those seem like the hardest.
They are. For those, the book introduces vigilant monitoring, which is essentially a form of mindfulness, being actively aware in the moment.
So being on the lookout.
Yeah, being actively aware and on the lookout for the specific cues that trigger that old, ingrained habit. For those deeply automatic responses, Conscious vigilance in the moment is often the most effective short-term strategy to interrupt that loop and consciously choose a different behavior instead. It takes effort.
Pre-commitment is another smart strategy mentioned. Making a decision when your self-control is high to protect yourself against future moments of weakness.
Definitely. Like setting up an automatic transfer into your savings account right when you get paid, or setting a firm, unchangeable deadline for a project when you're feeling motivated and clear-headed.
So you make the choice now, when you're strong.
To make the desired behavior easier or the undesired behavior harder for your future self who might be tired, stressed, or tempted later on. You're basically tying your future self's hands in a helpful way.
And yes, even plain old positive thinking has a role to play, doesn't it?
It does. Generating optimistic predictions about your ability to actually succeed can boost motivation. And Dean emphasizes making the benefits of the new habit and the real costs of the old bad habit really vivid and personally relevant.
Like the nail-biting example.
Yeah.
If you truly hate the look of bitten nails and deeply desire having nice-looking hands,
That vivid contrast and that strong desire can significantly boost your motivation to stick with the change. Make it real for yourself.
this links to another fascinating point. Exercising self-control is like building a muscle. It gets stronger with practice.
Yeah, Dean points to studies showing that practicing self-control in one area, like maybe sticking to an exercise program or carefully managing your money, actually strengthens your overall capacity for self-control.
Seriously, it spills over.
It seems to.
Yeah.
Those benefits can spill over into completely unrelated areas of life, improving study habits, being tidier, better emotional regulation, even having more impulse control around things like alcohol or spending. It's like a general strengthening.
But the book is realistic too. It acknowledges changing habits is hard work, even simple ones. It mentions the psychologist Hugo Minsterberg,
Oh yeah, his door experiment.
who tried to change a really trivial habit just using a different door to leave his house, and he found himself repeatedly, annoyingly, reverting to the old door without even thinking.
It just shows how deep these tracks can run. That's why for long-term success, Dean really stresses that focusing on small, incremental changes is usually much more effective than trying to completely overhaul everything all at once.
Right. Like the dieting example, don't try to eat perfectly healthy overnight. Maybe just start by consistently adding one apple to your daily routine. Establish that small habit first.
Get that win, build momentum, and then build from there. Small steps add up.
This deep dive also touched briefly on how habits relate to other, maybe surprising areas like creativity and even happiness.
Yeah, for creativity, Dean notes that while artists and scientists often feel ideas just sort of bubble up from some unconscious process, expertise itself can paradoxically lead to functional fixedness.
Meaning those habitual ways of thinking or approaching problems that can actually hinder finding novel solutions. Like the old saying, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Exactly that. Your established mental habits can blind you to other possibilities. That's where introducing randomness or constraints, as the book suggests, can sometimes help break those fixed patterns.
Like the ink painter who revitalized his style by just starting with random marks on the page.
Or improv comedians using unexpected audience suggestions to force them out of their standard routines. It breaks the habit.
So creativity seems to require both that wandering, playful mind to generate possibilities and a focused, analytical mind to refine them. And the key is being able to switch between those habitual modes of thought.
That seems to be the case. Flexibility is key.
And what about happiness? The book discusses habituation, right?
Yeah.
Our tendency to just get used to circumstances, both good and bad.
Yes, it's a huge factor. It's part of why we're actually pretty bad at predicting how intensely positive or negative future events will make us feel and for how long they'll affect us. That's known as the affective forecasting error. We overestimate the impact, often.
We think winning the lottery will make us happy forever or a breakup will destroy us forever, but we adapt surprisingly quickly.
We do. But just as negative patterns can become habitual, the good news is we can intentionally cultivate happy habits. Dean highlights gratitude as a really well-researched practice.
Just being thankful.
Basically, yes. People who regularly engage in simple gratitude exercises, like maybe writing down a few things they're thankful for each week, consistently report higher levels of well-being, more optimism, and they even tend to engage in other positive behaviors like exercising more.
So it's a deliberate practice that kind of counters our natural tendency to just take the good things for granted once we get used to them.
Exactly. So Pulling it all together, it seems like while our automatic habits might set us in a certain direction, our conscious self, our planning mind, has the potential to decide where we ultimately want to go. The real challenge, maybe, is discerning which habits are actually serving us and which ones are holding us back.
That feels like a really good summary. The key takeaway from this deep dive into Dean's work is just how powerful habits are. They're these incredibly potent forces, often operating way below conscious awareness, shaped far more by our environment and our past actions than just our intentions right now.
Yeah, they can be a tremendous savior, right? Automating helpful routines, freeing up our minds, or they can be a significant curse, locking us into unproductive or even harmful patterns, sometimes completely against our conscious will.
But, and this is the hopeful part, while changing strong habits is genuinely difficult work, it takes real effort and strategy, the science does offer concrete paths forward. It's not impossible.
Not at all. It's about understanding that powerful influence of context, planning meticulously for challenges with those if-then statements, diligently monitoring your behavior and learning from it, strengthening your overall capacity for self-control like a muscle.
And focusing on building momentum through small, achievable steps, rather than trying to be perfect from day one.
Exactly. It's about recognizing when you're just running on autopilot and learning how to gently, strategically steer the plane. Often that means making changes to the environment around you or the structure of your internal responses, not just wishing you had more raw willpower.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you listening. Given how much of our behavior, as we've discussed, is influenced by those unconscious processes and those environmental cues Dean talks about, what's one small environmental change you could make, maybe even starting today, in your own life? Something to either make a good habit you want just a little bit easier to do, or maybe make a bad habit you want to break just a little bit harder. Something to think about.